Let's start with something many parents feel, but almost never say out loud. What did I do wrong? Was it something I missed? Something I should have done differently? Something I didn't notice early enough? Or maybe something I did, without realizing the impact. Because when your child struggles, your mind naturally goes there. You replay moments. You question decisions. You look for a reason. And very often, you land on yourself. So before we go any further, let's make one thing very clear. ADHD and autism are not caused by bad parenting, not by being too strict, not by being too permissive, not by giving too much screen time, not by sugar, not by a single choice you made. And hearing that might feel reassuring for a moment. But real relief doesn't come from just hearing it. It comes from understanding why it's true. ADHD and autism are what we call neurodevelopmental conditions, which means they are rooted in how the brain develops, very early in life, long before behavior becomes visible, long before a child is expected to sit still, to focus, or to regulate emotions. And most importantly, long before parenting style has the kind of influence many people assume. Research shows that genetics play a very strong role, not in a simple, one-gene way, but in complex patterns that influence how the brain is wired. Things like how easily attention can be directed, how quickly impulses arise, how strongly emotions are felt, how sensory information is processed. These are not learned behaviors. They are part of how the brain is built. And this development begins early, often before birth. During pregnancy, the brain is forming connections at an incredible speed. Millions of neural connections are being created and organized. This process follows a general pattern, but it is also influenced by genetics, which means, from the very beginning, each brain develops in a slightly different way. And here's an important shift in perspective. Different does not mean damaged. Different means the brain processes the world in its own way. Now, genetics are a big part of the picture, but they're not the whole story. There are also early developmental processes that shape how the brain functions. For example, how different brain regions communicate with each other, how efficiently signals are transmitted, how the nervous system responds to stimulation. These are biological systems, not something a parent controls. And this is where many misunderstandings come from, because what parents see is behavior. A child who doesn't listen, a child who reacts strongly, a child who struggles with focus or transitions. And behavior feels like something that should be shaped, corrected, or guided. But underneath that behavior is a system that is still developing, and in some cases, developing differently. So, instead of asking, what caused this? A more helpful question becomes, how does this brain work? Because once you ask that question, everything starts to shift. There's something else. That often creates confusion. Many parents feel like, this wasn't there before, or this suddenly got worse. But in reality, the underlying differences were often there all along. They just weren't as visible yet. In early childhood, demands are relatively low. A child can move freely, take breaks, follow their interests, but as they grow, the expectations increase. Sit still, pay attention, wait your turn, manage frustration, handle transitions smoothly. And this is where the gap becomes visible. Not because something new appeared, but because the environment started asking more from the system. This is why many parents notice changes during specific phases: starting daycare, entering preschool, beginning school, These are moments where demands increase, and that's often when differences become more noticeable, and it's also why early support matters so much. Not to fix the child, but to adjust the environment in a way that supports how the brain works. Because when there is a mismatch, everything feels harder. More frustration, more overwhelm, more conflict. But when there is alignment, things begin to stabilize. Now, there's one more important piece that brings many parents a sense of relief. No two children are exactly the same. Even with the same diagnosis, the experience can look very different. One child may struggle more with attention, another with emotional regulation, another with sensory sensitivity, because every brain is unique. And that means support is not one size fits all. This is why comparing your child to others often leads to more confusion than clarity. Because you're not looking for a perfect match. You're trying to understand your child's specific pattern. And once you begin to understand that pattern, something important happens. You stop seeing behavior as a problem to fix and start seeing it as information. Information about what the brain needs. A meltdown becomes a signal, not of bad behavior, but of overwhelm. Inattention becomes a signal, not of laziness, but of difficulty directing focus. Restlessness becomes a signal, not of disobedience, but of a nervous system that is seeking regulation. And when you see those signals clearly, your response changes. You become less reactive, more intentional, more focused on support instead of control. And that's where real change begins. So if you take one thing from this video, let it be this: you did not cause this. And more importantly, you are not powerless. Because while you didn't create the pattern, you can absolutely support it. And that support does not require perfection. It doesn't require having all the answers. It starts with something much simpler: understanding how your child's brain works, and responding in a way that matches it. In the next video, we're going to look at something very practical: the mistakes that often make these challenges worse, without parents even realizing it. Because small changes in how we respond can reduce stress, reduce conflict, and make everyday life a lot easier for both you and your child. And if this video helped you, let go of even a small part of that self-doubt. You can share it with someone who might need exactly that reminder today.